Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming on today. I'm absolutely delighted to have somebody that I respect incredibly highly, Carol Stewart, who not only is she a top voice of LinkedIn, but she is an executive coach. And I've known Carol for a number of years. She is a woman with much wisdom. And it felt the right time to discuss not Will Smith versus Chris Rock, but how we can relate this to situation of being triggered, our buttons being pressed within work and in our home situations. So if you would like to contribute to this conversation, please feel free to put your comments at the bottom. But please, could you put your name in as well? Because we're not able to see who's commenting. So welcome, Carol.
Hello, Susan. Hello. Thank you for inviting me on. Looking forward to the discussion.
We've been discussing this for for 30 minutes as we've been warming up for this event. And let's just spend a minute talking about the situation that happened on Sunday night at the Oscars from your perspective.
Yes, I mean, I think that they were both in the wrong. I think it was very insensitive what Chris said. I know some people are saying, well, he didn't know that she had an alopecia. Some are saying that, well, he does know because she's been very open about it. And also that he had some sort of about in 2016 when there was some sort of incident that I think it was very insensitive, and also I think that Will should not have responded the way that he did. He could have responded verbally. He could have made his concerns or voiced his opinion verbally, and that would have probably had more of an impact than going up and then giving him one. And I think it also leads us to looking at the way that the comedy profession as a whole is, and maybe things need to change in terms of how comedians do make jokes about people. Because I've been to many a comedy show myself, and if you're sat in the front row, you will get picked on, and maybe we need to rethink that comedians maybe need to be a bit more sensitive to the jokes that they make about people.
I totally agree with you. And certainly the post that almost prompted this discussion, I said that as speakers, as leaders, managers, comedians, we need to take responsibility for what we say and the impact that might have on other people. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. Leaders need to be mindful of what they say and the impact that it has on others. We all do. We all have a personal responsibility, I think.
So by this, do you mean actually what you say? Because sometimes we need to say as leaders, we need to say something quite direct, or we might need to say something that is not going to be very palatable to your team or your company. What do you mean by that?
I think we all need to be mindful of the impact that our words can have on other people. And so, as a leader, yes, you may need to deliver something unpleasant, but it's the words that you choose to use. And also, individuals, we all take personal responsibility to think about, are our words going to cause offense? And when it comes to social media, it's easy just to see something and you just fire off a response without giving it any thought.
Yes.
Not thinking about how your words can land on the person that is receiving them.
And I suppose with social media, because it is literally text, it is the written word, and often without punctuation, it's immediate. Somebody else, it could interpret that in a different way, whereas tone of voice might alter the meaning.
And this is it, because written communication can be so often misinterpreted. You know, it just takes a comma that's missed or a full stop in the wrong way. It can change the whole tone of what has been written.
I don't know. All right, so we've got Donna McGrath. Hi. I know that you're going to have some contribution. I'm really looking forward to your comments, Donna. I think that it's really, really interesting, the idea about how content or a message is delivered as a leader or a manager. We could talk about the P&O recorded videos sacking a number of people. My immediate thought was these leaders are cowards. They weren't prepared to meet people face to face, and it was done in my opinion, with such disrespect. What are your thoughts about that?
It is, and in some ways, it's like taking the easy way out, because so you send a video, you don't have to face the onslaught of the people that are going to be receiving that message. You've done what you need to do, you've delivered your message. But again, you need to take in, you know, delivering a message like that is going to completely change people's lives. It needs to be done with a bit more consideration as to the impact that those words are going to have on those individuals.
Yes. Now, Donna has said, always lift the phone and speak to people when you can, or at any level, really. Yes. Yeah. There is a real difference when you actually speak and you use your voice. I'm a great fan on LinkedIn of leaving a voice message, as you probably know, in messages. It adds a human element, doesn't it? And people can pick up those subtle nuances.
That's right. Yes. The written communication. There's so many times where I've sort of been the observer of arguments, disagreements between people because someone has misinterpreted what somebody has said in an email or in a text message or WhatsApp message.
Well, let's get back to being a leader or a speaker and giving feedback. Because that is one of those dangerous things when there are a lot of people in the room. You know, we've been there. I come from a performing background, and believe you me, the person giving the feedback, sometimes they almost get this comedy feeling, this rush of adrenaline. I'm in charge. I can get a cheap laugh out of this. But there's somebody at the end of that.
Yeah, and I think it's about, rather than just shooting from the hip, so to speak, is thinking about how your words are going to land, thinking about what it is that you want to say, and how you can say that in a way that doesn't put the other person down, or make them feel like crap, but how you can get even if it is an unpleasant message, how you can deliver that in a way that is very factual, based on evidence-based, that is factual and is based on the behaviors or the circumstances or the situation.
Now, I didn't want to spend too much time on the Will Smith, Chris Rock incident. However, one thing I wanted to go back to was the idea of what might have been going on neuroscientifically, you know, in the brain, in Will Smith's brain.
Yeah,
I've got my own opinion about this, but if you wanted to add, and I know Donna will add something to this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it must have triggered something in Will that has triggered his fight flight syndrome, that has triggered him to fight, so go into fight mode. Whether there was something going on beforehand, whether there's something prior to the event, but it clearly triggered something in it. He was defending his wife, standing up for his wife, and that is not sort of behavior that I've never seen that kind of behavior from Will Smith before. So it to me, it seems quite out of character for him. So something must have happened to trigger that in him, for him to then respond in that way. But what he should have done is managed his emotions, regulated his emotions, and then responded.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this before. This was a huge, huge event. This could be the pinnacle of his career. And just the adrenaline and the, as you say, the fight or flight, the adrenaline and the probably a little bit of cortisol pumping around, that you are in this heightened emotional state anyway. And just that little button made him respond in that way, that if he just had a deep breath and reflected, he would have sat down, or maybe controlled himself and gone up on stage, used the microphone to say, you know, I love my wife very much. She has this disease, and I know it's heartbreaking for her. Let's all show her a bit of love, or something like that.
Well, that's right. Yeah, he could have, or even just to tell Chris that I don't think what you're saying is appropriate.
Yes.
So please do not make jokes about my wife's condition.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Donna says it's also about emotional resilience and people awareness. Yes.
Very much so.
Absolutely. Because if you are giving bad news, for example, you've got to be resilient to the response that might be coming from other people, but having awareness of how they might respond and how it's going to land and how it might impact their lives. What are your thoughts?
And that's it, you know, as leaders, it's having a high level of emotional intelligence will enable you to be aware of how and why people respond to you the way that they do, and how and why you respond to people the way that you do. And so that you can, and having that awareness, you can then identify, well, how do I modify my behavior in order to get the best outcome?
Yes. Now, Donna says the thing is, the script is prearranged by the Academy, which is something that is bonkers to me. Surely they would have undertaken some research, fact checking. But I think, Carol, you mentioned that this was an off the cuff remark.
Yeah, that's what I had. I mean, I'm not sure how true it is, but that's what I had read, was that it wasn't on the teleprompter. So he must have just seen an opportunity for a joke and gone off script and made that joke.
Yeah, I agree, Donna. But let's think about, we've touched on this, the idea that as individuals, we should take responsibility for how we respond when our button is pressed.
Yes,
and I know
yes.
that you often work with people on this issue.
Well, yes, I often have clients who may find themselves in situations where somebody may say or do something that really triggers them, and they feel like they want to go on the attack, but you can't fight fire with fire. So,
No.
you know, rather than sort of going back on and attacking with fire, it's about regulating those emotions and being mindful and aware of those situations that trigger that sort of response in you, and then looking at how you manage those emotions in that moment. Because many of us are very led by our emotions and act and behave according to how we're feeling, which is as a result of our thoughts and beliefs about ourselves, the situations that we're in, the environment we're in. So when you find yourself in a situation that gets you into that heightened emotional state, rather than just responding from that place, just take a moment and pause and just ask yourself, okay, well, what's going on for me here? Being rational about your thoughts, rationalizing your thoughts, and just challenging what you think and believe about that moment, that situation, and then looking at, well, what is a more helpful response? What is a more helpful perspective to take on it, and respond in that way?
I think that's really interesting. I did quite a bit of work last year on creating a psychological zone or a safe working environment. And this was for an asset management company, thinking about what to say, what to do. And there is this fear, the fight flight, but also there is a fawning, that some people, if they're in a very negative almost dangerous environment psychologically, they then begin to fawn. You know what I mean by that, not Bambi. But, yes, sir, kiss the ring as a self-protection thing. And that can be quite difficult. But I wonder if it's worthwhile for self-evaluation, thinking about different situations that we might have at work or at home, how we respond to those situations and how we, write down what triggers us. I know what triggers me. People from Surrey. Apologies if there's anyone watching from Surrey, but I've had so many negative comments and actual actions from people from Surrey that think that me from Birmingham, that I'm from Peaky Blinders. And it's reached the stage where I know now that I'm going to get triggered.
Yeah, and I think that is, again, self-awareness. Self-awareness to me is very much a key quality to have, a key skill to have for leaders, because that self-awareness will enable you to be aware of what are those triggers, because you may find that it's just a certain type of person that triggers that in you. It might be certain situations, certain conditions that will trigger that sort of a response in you. And so having that awareness then means that you can mitigate it, or you can put things into place so that when you are in those situations, you don't just either fight fire with fire, or fawn, or, as you say, go into that. Yeah.
Donna says, completely agree, Carol. I think Chris may have thought it was a safe conversation to have. We can't always be totally aware of others' internal processing, and therefore I know how they will respond. Sorry, my comments are behind. Sorry. Thank you, Donna. And then, Susan, you don't sound Brummy. I can do very good Peaky Blinders. My son is very proud of my Peaky Blinders. I'm not going to say the phrase that I normally say to him because it's got some swear words, of course. It's Peaky Blinders. But so I think that we also touched in our preparation on gender-based jokes.
Yeah.
Because we know that with certain comments that are made, there are some areas that now, quite rightly, are not acceptable. But for whatever reason, some jokes towards women are still acceptable within society. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think any sort of joke which is putting down somebody you need to sort of relook at. If you look, I think that if you're sort of looking at comedy as a profession, maybe there needs to be some sort of a shift in terms of the way that comedians make their jokes about other people. We look at, say, comedy 30 years ago, and what was seen as funny then and acceptable then is no longer acceptable.
No.
Maybe something needs to be done to relook at it now, and maybe that is down to us as individuals to say, well, we're not going to listen to comedians that make those sorts of jokes. We're not going to tolerate this. But I think as we become more aware about what causes people offence, it's then things need to change. And I guess it's finding the balance between what is an acceptable joke and what is offensive, and it will mean different things to different people as well.
Yes, I agree. A couple of thoughts that I've got is that I wonder, in that performance, when you're in that performance zone, the adrenaline is going, and you're almost not thinking about the consequences, and you immediately think, oh, that's a good joke. I've seen that person on the front row. How?
Yeah.
And then afterwards, there are the implications. Do you think that, and that's what often happens, doesn't it, with stand-up?
Yeah.
Do you think, therefore, as an audience, we speak with our feet, speak by not attending certain comedians because we know that they have a tendency to be derogatory about particular people or situations.
Yeah. I mean, we have that power within us to vote with our feet, to vote with our purses. You know, we don't go to pay for their events, and then that, you know, you sort of talked about them being in that moment where the adrenaline's going and they're in that heightened state, and they're, you know, it's just reeling off the back of their tongue these jokes because that's what they naturally do, and it's about self-regulation for them.
Yeah. Joyce has said, my thoughts exactly. Hi, Joyce. Thank you for coming on. If there's anybody else that's come on that would like to introduce themselves, in fact, now I'm able to see names. For so often when I've done these in the past, it just says LinkedIn person. So but please introduce yourself if you are joining and would like to make a contribution. Donna says, I personally think this world has become far too sensitive on everything. Not just female, to the point freedom of expression has gone out of the window. We need to be a little bit tougher across the board. That is a very, very interesting observation.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
That perhaps we are, you know, I don't know about you, Carol, but there are certain things that I feel worried about saying because I don't want to cause, A, cause offence, and B, for there to be a backlash from people who might not understand, understand the wrong way, might interpret what I've said incorrectly.
Yes. I mean, that there is, that is sort of like knowing that, you know, because everybody has sort of different levels of what causes them offence, and, you know, you may say, make a joke to somebody who takes something very personally and make the same joke to someone else about the same thing, and they just laugh it off with you, because a lot of that depends on, you know, how they're sort of, you know, what their resilience is like, what they are like as an individual. But I think we do need to be aware that not everybody has that level of resilience. Not everybody can take certain things, and so we do need to be mindful of it, I do think.
Do you think that it's partly due to the size of the audience? So if you were, you know, Carol, we're back in the room, you doing a big keynote speech at a conference, which I can see you doing, and everybody loving it, that you would possibly say things differently to a small team that you know very well?
I think, me personally, not necessarily, because I know I'm sort of mindful of how words can either sort of make somebody or break somebody.
Yeah.
So, you know, so when I do talk, so I'm mindful of what I say, because I, you know, when I speak, I want to build people up, not pull them down.
Now, Donna said some more things. It stops conversation and understanding each other. But how would we know unless we say something for them to tell us? That's a good point. You know, maybe if you're in a big conference at a keynote, you could give everybody a red and a green card. Yeah, or with fired or hired or something like that. You know, maybe there's that. And certainly as a speaker and performer, I can look in the room, and people might be looking at their phones, or but they're engaged, or I could interpret, well, nobody's listening, when in fact they might have just been fired, that department, so they're looking glum, but they've got to be in the conference. And these are difficult things to do, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, and so picking up on what Donna said about how would we know when we say something for them unless we say something, and I think it's just about having that awareness that, you know, we may say things that cause people offense, and getting, I think the more we get to know and understand people who are different from us, the more we get to know and understand what is considered, what they find offensive.
Yes, I would agree with that. And dare I say it, nobody is going to have everybody that loves what they say.
No, that's right.
100%. There are
Yeah.
always going to be people that it might just not be of interest, or might push a button, or they might have the opposing view on it. And that is part of being human, being part of the human race. And as long as we're respectful to other people, I feel, and if it has caused offence, immediately to apologise.
Well, I mean, this is it. Like you say, you're not necessarily going to know that something may cause somebody an offence, but once you do know and you are aware of it, then apologise and learn from that as well. Because
but what happens if you are triggered and an extreme response? The most extreme would be slapping, obviously, but perhaps verbally responding in a negative way. What could you do if you're the person that has done that afterwards? Do you hold your ground and say, well, this person pushed my buttons? Or do you say, when you've calmed down, look, I'm really sorry. Can we have a chat about this so that we just try and resolve this?
now, I would say once you've calmed down and you've had time to reflect on the situation and you've recognised that, you know, your behaviour was unacceptable, then apologise and learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you find out something more about the other person, because they might not, you know, there might have been a complete misunderstanding.
Yeah, and one of the things I often do with clients who, you know, in situations where there's someone who may push their buttons, they'll push the buttons in the wrong way, is also to put themselves in the other person's shoes. You know, what could be going on for them, why they are behaving the way that they're behaving, because oftentimes when you're able to empathize in that way, you get a better understanding of why they've acted the way that they did, which then can help you in your response to them.
Yes. Now we're getting some really good comments. John Martinez. Hi, John. Lovely to see you online. I truly believe that if our viewpoint is from a place of kindness and compassion, we give ourselves a much better chance.
And I totally agree with that. You know, if you're saying something and you know, give thoughts to what you're saying, is it going to put somebody down or is it going to lift somebody up?
Yes.
And if you know that there's a possibility that what you're saying could put somebody down, could cause somebody offense, then maybe don't say it, or say it in a way that is going to be received better.
Yeah, it's like a cheap laugh, isn't it? Yeah,
that's right. We've got no idea what somebody may have been through, what somebody's going through. When you just get a person before you, you don't know what has gone on for them the day before.
Yeah.
And you may just say something that could just tip them over the edge.
Yeah. Joyce says, I told my husband about this meeting today, and he said, Will had no right to hit Chris. I told him, how would he feel if someone made a joke about me not having kids? How would he feel? Because we have struggled with having kids, lost pregnancies, etc. So sorry to hear this, Joyce. He went silent. Like Carol said, we need to have emotional intelligence and be kind with words to people. Brava. And I'm sending all my love, Joyce.
Yeah, likewise. And I could understand, you know, if your husband did feel like that in that sort of situation. However, if he's able to manage that anger and that emotion, and you can make more of an impact sometimes with your words, because your words can be quite powerful. And saying something to somebody to get your opinion across in an articulate way can have more impact than just doing what Will did.
Yes. Now, a couple comments, and then I want to say something. I need to remember. Joyce said we have no idea what people are dealing with. And she says, thanks. And John says, one of our company values is be kinder than necessary, because everyone you come across is fighting its own battle. What an amazing company, John. I know your work. It's just incredible. And Joyce said, thank you all. Donna says, totally agree with John. I would also say the word wisdom doesn't seem to have any place anymore in our language or when we talk about leaders.
I think wisdom is something that is needed as a leader.
Yes, and I introduced you as having lots of wisdom, didn't I, at the beginning, by sheer chance? But absolutely, we talk about all of these things of leadership that, you've got to be strong and all, but wisdom and empathy and emotional intelligence and good communication skills are not, and this was what I was going to say, not just the words, but how we say them on nonverbal communication and vocally, all play a part in this, don't they?
Yeah, and I think what Donna said there, when we talk about leaders, we don't, as our qualities of leaders, we don't. I can't recall when I've last heard somebody say wisdom is a quality of leadership, but I think Donna's totally right.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Donna. I wish our present leader in UK had some wisdom. Oh, I didn't say that. Sorry. And then we've got a LinkedIn user. I'm so sorry. I don't know who it is. Spot on, Joyce, sending you love and light. If you'd like to introduce yourself, we'd love to know who it is. Donna says, I've just started to read the New Testament, which has been the best self-help book. It talks about wisdom, discernment, and understanding at its basic level. I wonder if we should have a LinkedIn Live about this. And Donna come on as well. It would be chaos, but
no.
Yeah,
and there's a lot to learn from, whether you are a Christian or not. I think that the words of wisdom that are in the New Testament, in the Bible, are things which we can apply to every aspect of our lives.
Definitely. And it's the basis of the values, certainly within the legal structure, isn't it? A lot of them go back to the elements of the New Testament. Oh, Donna says, I'd love that. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'll organize it, girls. Are there, LinkedIn user says, yes, please. Oh, please, could you introduce yourself? I don't know who you are, and I'd love to say hello properly. Now, we've been talking for half an hour on this, and we're having some great comments from people. Are there any questions, or would anybody like to make any other comments? I love this. Yeah. Oh, we don't know who LinkedIn user is. Oh, I'm sorry. Please introduce yourself. Oh, LinkedIn person is Sarah Salter. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Now, are there any other questions, observations? We've now got another LinkedIn Live that we're going to do soon, which I'll organize for a couple of weeks' time, if we're up for it. A question for Carol. So go ahead, Donna, if you want to write it in.
Yes, ask ahead.
And hey, so I think that must be Sarah again. So just waiting for Donna to write her thing. I think we've covered everything. Taking responsibility both as a speaker and the person that's getting triggered. John says, imagine if Chris Rock's comment would have been something like, Jada, no matter how you wear your hair, you always look beautiful. Bravo, John. I mean, she might well have been feeling very, very self-conscious with her hair, although she looked absolutely stunning. That green dress, I mean, goodness me.
Yeah.
She looked so beautiful. But yes, that would have been a bouquet of love going to her. Donna says, what is the best tip to reduce your trigger, cortisol? Oh, I can answer this as well.
Yeah. So when you're in that moment is just pausing sometimes taking some deep breaths, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, out for 4, and repeating that a few times, and then looking at what you think and believe in that situation and challenging it. So recognizing, oftentimes we recognize what's happening to us physiologically before we reckon what's going on through our mind. So if you sort of really get to know and understand yourself and your body, where does it show up physiologically? Some people, they get a tension in their stomach. Some people, they get tension in their shoulders, their head, their heart beats faster, their hands become sweaty and clammy, or they blush, they go red. So when you notice those physiological symptoms when you're in a situation that is increasing your emotional state, you're giving you a heightened emotional state, just pause and ask yourself, okay, what is going on here? What do you think and believe about this situation, and challenging your thoughts and rationalizing them and putting them into perspective. And if it's something that's happening in the moment and you haven't got time to do all that, just tell yourself, right, I'm not going to react to this right now. I'm going to think about that later this evening when I get home or whenever. Right now, I'm just going to get through this moment. So it's about acknowledging and accepting what is going on, but not letting it take over in that moment.
Oh, brilliant. What I would say was, cortisol is one of the chemicals that is secreted when our bodies go into the fight or flight mode. And what we need to try and do as quickly as possible is to balance that with some of the more, what I would call the more happiness type chemicals in the body. The most immediate one, Carol, that you said, and is quite correct, is the breathing, the deep breathing exercise. And what it does is that the vagus nerve and that goes up the back of the spine into the brain, that will send the messages. It's okay, folks, we don't need to secrete any more adrenaline and cortisol. We don't need to run away. And it starts to rebalance the chemical imbalance in our brains so that we can relax. There are other things that you can do, like singing, laughing, moving around, which might not be possible, but you could perhaps visualize a happy place that you have, what I would call a self-psychological zone, such as walking on the beach and trying to rebalance that cortisol. But I'd be happy to have a chat with you, Donna. It's something that I've had to work on a lot. Are there any more questions?
Whilst we're waiting for more questions, there's something that I want to throw into the mix.
Oh.
It was as a result of a comment that someone put on the post. So I shared your post the other day that you
oh, right, thank you.
And someone commented on it, and just throwing this out into the mix. And what they said was that, alopecia is not it's not a disease, it's a condition. And they also commented that comedians make many jokes about men who go bald, and it can be just as emotional for men losing their hair. But it's because and it's to do with sort of the gender. And I thought they raised a very valid point in that, the way that women are portrayed in the media as being, take the Oscars, for example. There's always a heavy focus on how a woman is dressed, what she's got on, what she's wearing. But whereas with the men, you don't get that focus. And in some ways, when we sort of looking at this situation, we're looking at how a woman will respond emotionally, whereas it's okay for a man. So it's kind of like that sort of in reverse sort of gender, how people are sort of responding to that situation. So that's just something I'd be interested to hear what people's thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I this is again something we talked about. Quite often, with respect, men go bald, and it is a genetic condition, isn't it? Whereas for women, if they go bald, it is quite often due to illness or stress. The not my family though. I mentioned this earlier, I've got loads of hair, but my mother and my grandma have very little hair and have gone bald, and it was very, very distressing for them. But I think it is a good point. It's almost acceptable for people to laugh about a bald man. And maybe bald men, I'm not a bald man, they respond by making a joke of it, but inside it might be hurting because it's so not sure if this, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. So I don't know what that was related to
I think
Donna.
it's regarding to what she's saying about her sort of anxiety and telling people that she's, yeah.
Okay. What do you guys think about mindfulness as an antidote to amygdala hijack cortisol?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that mindfulness, John, is a great way of managing that. And in fact, on the coaching session earlier today, there was a particular situation where the person was triggered by certain events, and what was one of the things that I was suggested was mindfulness, as a way of just bringing yourself into that moment and being able to remain calm.
And of course, with mindfulness, you're using the breath as well. So that's going to help with that. Donna says, Carol, I love you raising this. I feel that we need to also be aware of how we're impacting our men by constantly talking about women. Yes. Yes. It's not just about boldness, though. It's generally how we constantly put a focus on women so much that men are completely discounted. I think we need to invite men. I agree with you. And certainly there were men that were invited to this session, but I totally agree that there are, I'm sure, Carol, you have done events where it's organized by a women's organization, but there are always men there. And certainly I welcome men, and I do not make it female specific or being derogatory about men, because there are many men that want the same training that I offer, and they're often disregarded.
Yeah, I mean, I often get, my focus is introverted women who are senior leaders, and the reason for that is because of one, the unfavorable bias that there is towards introversion in the workplace, and also because of the gender inequality that still exists at senior levels. I get lots of men saying, well, why are my articles focused on women? And it's, a lot of times what I write about can apply to men.
Yes,
that is because my focus is women because of the reasons I've just mentioned, but it's not to exclude men, because I still coach men as well and work with men as well.
But that is a good point, and we should be mindful that and respectful of men too. We've been going for quite a while, been going for over 40 minutes. Are there any more comments? And I will contact you all about our next LinkedIn Live that we've just decided to organize. Are there any other comments? Because I would like to thank you all for being on here and for making some great observations. Carol, do you want to add anything?
I'll just say thank you, everybody, for being so interactive and engaging with it. It's been great to see your comments. This is a very interesting discussion. I like to have discussions about the things that don't often get talked about, which affect us all. So it's been great that we've been able to have this discussion. And I too, Donna, look forward to that discussion about days.
And Donna says that she does a lot of work on masculine and feminine energy and the impact that has on gender bias. Well, I think that we've got another LinkedIn Live there. So thank you so much. And thank you, Carol. It is always such an honor to discuss different things with you. You have such a balanced wisdom.
Thank you, Susan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care, everyone, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.